Good evening and welcome to our webinar. Tonight we're going to be talking about dental zirconia and understanding the hype. My name is Franklin Shull, coming to you from South Carolina. Hope everyone's had a good day. Looks like we're going to have great attendance for our meeting. So first I want to start off by thanking a couple people. I want to thank Viva Learning for their continued support in dental continuing education. They've always been great to work for. Make sure you go to the website and check out their other webinars they have coming up. I also want to thank Ivoclar Vivadent for their support for this program and many others. They're always supportive of dental education. So tonight we're going to talk about dental zirconia, and I'm sure you have an opinion on zirconia. Most of us in the dental field have used it in some form or fashion, and you probably have an opinion. The one thing that I'll share with you tonight, or one of the many things I'll share with you, is the changes that we've seen in zirconia over the past about 4 years. And those changes have allowed us to do some really, really cool things. So let's talk about zirconia. So right now, recent surveys have told us that dental zirconia, our monolithic zirconia, is the most prescribed ceramic material for posterior crowns. This has taken over the PFM market and also the gold market. So that's quite a swing in where we have been in years past. So we've seen it. I think the original reason that zirconia was looked into was an alternative for the metal base of the PFMs. So that was the original reason, but since then the uses have expanded. So the reason that we always liked dental zirconia from the beginning was because it's very strong, and of course the color. The color is something with zirconia that we've had a love-hate relationship with, because it being white was certainly better than the darkness of the metal that we would often have to opaque out, but it's also a very white from what we've always seen with the earlier zirconias. The white can be as much of a problem as the dark when we're trying to mask it in certain situations. So we'll talk about how that's changed over the years. One of the reasons that zirconia has taken off as it has is the advancements in our CAD/CAM workflow. Because of the way zirconia is milled, the computer software programs have certainly allowed us to streamline that workflow, and it's making it a lot easier for labs now to produce monolithic zirconia and frameworks of zirconia for multiple other uses. So without the computer-aided technology, we probably wouldn't see zirconia being as successful as it is. So another fact about zirconia, and you may know this, you may not, partially centered zirconia is milled, obviously, into a framework or a restoration. And then that's the first centering, and then after this further centering, the restoration is 20% larger than the final restoration is going to be. So this slide will show you sort of what comes out of a mill, and every type of zirconia has a density that will be marked on the puck, so that the lab technician knows exactly how much shrinkage he's going to have with the final restoration. So as you can see, a lot of computer technology is needed to formulate the calculations for the proper fit. Another issue that has had a lot of research behind it is the biocompatibility of zirconia. So zirconia has been researched for quite a few decades now. As a biomaterial, the research really started probably in the 1960s. And then papers were being published on zirconia in the late 60s. Zirconia initially, from a material standpoint, was being looked at as an alternative for the ball heads of total hip replacements. And these types of prosthetics are still being used today. They've gone through quite a few generations, and you'll hear about different prosthetic parts being used, very similar to what you may see on the screen. So this is one of the renditions of a hip replacement implant, and you can see that the ceramic, in this case, is zirconia for the liner and for the head. So this is because of the strength of the material. A couple other interesting research articles targeted biofilm, and biofilm is something that we're all pretty aware of in dentistry right now, just because of all of the news about biofilm in our water lines. We know biofilm is basically bacteria that can attack or stick to the walls of a lot of things, including dental restorations. And we found that certain ceramics and other materials, composites, and even some of the earlier acrylics had a really high tendency for biofilm to stick to them. And so this study talked about zirconia having one of the lowest and thinnest biofilms compared to other high-strength ceramics. Another interesting study talked about less biofilm from zirconia than even titanium. So this really starts us thinking about implant abutments. If we can have an implant abutment with very low biofilm attraction, then that means less bacteria around our abutments, which is always a good thing. It's also something to think about around our crowns. Maybe we have a patient that's a periopros patient, and we're really trying to keep as much bacteria away from the gingival sulcus as possible. Something to think about. Using zirconia may be an option for cases like this. I think strength is probably one of the main reasons that most of us have looked to zirconia in the past. Strength is something that we've always fought with in dentistry. If it looked good, it usually wasn't strong. If it was strong, it usually didn't look good. And zirconia caught most of our attention because of the strength, and it was something that we could work with as far as color. I'm not sure how many dentists or dental people didn't see the hammer test on the zirconia crown quite a few years ago, when zirconia was starting to become really popular as a monolithic restoration. And the test was placing a monolithic zirconia crown on a piece of wood and then taking a hammer and smashing the crown into the wood. And surprisingly, the crown didn't fracture or shatter. Any other material that is tooth colored that I know of would have probably shattered. The test, the little video promotion that was produced, they also dug the crown out with a screwdriver, and then they hit it again, and pounding it into the wood. So great way to promote a product. I think it sticks in all of our heads, and it is a very strong material. We know since that video and since the beginning of monolithic zirconia, zirconia can break, and there are certain things that we have to know about where we put zirconia and the thickness of zirconia. And something that we'll kind of stress throughout this whole webinar is all zirconias are certainly not created equal. So mechanical properties of zirconia are the highest ever reported for any ceramic in prosthetic dentistry. This goes without saying. We'll look at a lot of different strength numbers and different ways to look at longevity as far as strength goes. And zirconia is certainly going to be stronger than any other dental ceramic that we've ever seen. So zirconia is zirconium dioxide. It's a white crystalline oxide of the metal element zirconium. Our dental zirconia is usually taken from the mineral ore zircon. This little table here is going to be really important. If you guys have your phones and you want to take a photo of this little section here, I think this is really important. I'll also give you guys, if you make it through the end of the webinar, at the very last slide, I'm going to give you a couple references where a lot of the material for this lecture comes from, and it'll also be some good future reading that you can get even more detail into the things that we're talking about tonight. But let's look at the three different categories here. So on the left of the slide, this is going to be 3 molar percentage of yttrium stabilized zirconia. So all that means is how much yttrium is going to be in the zirconia. And if you read the little table note, it talks about the yttrium content affects the physical and mechanical properties of zirconia. So originally all we had was the 3 molar yttrium stabilized zirconia. So that was certainly the first zirconias we had. As you see, it says underneath them they're very white and opaque. And you also see that it has very high mechanical properties. So this is the zirconia that most of us think about. You'll also see that it's mainly tetragonal phase zirconia, and there's going to be multiple phases that we see in zirconia. The 4 molar percentage yttrium stabilized zirconia is in the middle column. This is a relatively new category. The 4 and the 5 molar percentage are relatively new. And you can see how the different percentages of the yttrium changes the properties. So still high mechanical properties, but the 4 molar does have some translucency. So now we're dealing with the tetragonal and cubic phases of the zirconia. If you move over to the 5 molar percent yttrium stabilized zirconia, you'll see that it does have lower mechanical properties, but it does have high translucency. So now we're seeing more cubic phase of the zirconia. And so we're having about 50% cubic zirconia in the 5 molar percent of zirconia. So now we have these options, but with the options, we have to decide how far into the translucent zirconia that we really want to get into with the lower mechanical properties. And do we have other materials that are going to rival the same strength but maybe higher aesthetics when we get into that category? So we're going to talk more about the different types of zirconia, but keep this in mind as we go, because certainly the amount of yttrium in the zirconia certainly changes all of the properties. Let's talk about how you measure the strength. Flexural strength is the ability of a material to withstand bending forces. We've all seen flexural strength numbers, and that's sort of the number that's in our head when we look at any material. And we're impressed by these big numbers, but I'll kind of give you some ideas here. So flexural strength of feldspathic porcelains. So remember, feldspathic porcelains are basically any porcelain that we've used in the past to cover metal copings, like for a PFM. We have feldspathic veneers that are still being used, but not as much anymore because of their weakness. But you can see that feldspathic porcelains are usually right around 100 MPa. Lithium disilicate, which is Emax, you can see that much higher than the feldspathic porcelains, right around 500 MPa. And then translucent zirconia, so that's on the 5 molar yttrium percentage. You can see that that's really not much more than lithium disilicate, so the 6 to 700 range. And then our opaque, which would be the 3 molar yttrium stabilized zirconia, is going to be way up. That's the bright white stuff that we're used to seeing at the 12 to 1400 megapascals. So keep these numbers in mind also. So there's another way to look at strength, and another option is fracture toughness. And fracture toughness is the ability to resist fracture. If you talk to enough people that work with material science, they'll tell you that fracture toughness is actually a more accurate way to determine the strength of dental materials. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how you can think about fracture toughness. But let's compare fracture toughness. So feldspathics, once again, weaker of the ceramics, you're going to have 1 to 1.3. And then translucent zirconias, remember that's the 5 molar, you're going to get between 2 and 3. Lithium disilicate, which is that material that we've all used and love, is 2.5 to 3. So you see quite a bit of overlap there. And then the opaque zirconia is going to be 7 to 9, quite a big jump from 3 to 7. So fracture toughness is something that is a really nice way to think about strength for zirconia. So fracture toughness, probably the best way to think about it, and a lot of people have used this analogy, is to think about having a crack in the windshield of your car. So the force that it takes to propagate that crack further is going to be fracture toughness. So we see little porosities or imperfections in zirconia all the time. How much force will it take to propagate a crack through that zirconia is what fracture toughness really is. So flexural strength, maybe not as an accurate determination of true strength, but fracture toughness is more in line to what I think we should be thinking about. Some of the other things to think about when it comes to newer zirconias is 2014 is when we started seeing the big changes. The zirconia crystal size decreased about 0.2 microns, and the yttria once again was added to stabilize and form the cubic phase. So once again, 2014 is when we started really realizing that the percentage of yttria made a big difference. The other major change was increasing the aesthetics, and that all came around 2014 too, was the amount of alumina in the zirconia. So as the amount of alumina decreased, we were able to increase the translucency. So those are the two big component changes that we've seen since 2014 in zirconia. So this is where we started with zirconia as coping materials, and as you know, we would add layering ceramic, which is a feldspathic type ceramic, over top of the coping, basically duplicating the same idea as we did with PFMs, or porcelain fused to metal. Now, while we of course get a better aesthetic value, we would not really have a stronger restoration because chipping was still seen quite often with the coping method. This is sort of a cross-section of a zirconia coping and then feldspathic type porcelain layered over that. And you can see that, once again, very much like a porcelain fused to metal crown, except for the metal's been substituted with the zirconia. Back in the earlier days, Procera was one of the companies that had an alumina core, which was a very nice restoration, and then they added their addition to Procera zirconia, where they had the zirconia core layered with ceramic. And these crowns are fine. They are still quite a few out there, and some people still use them. If the coping is designed properly that supports the layering ceramic, you could have a very long-lasting restoration. We're seeing zirconia frameworks really take off too. We can see everything from hybrids to long span bridges being used, and most of that use is being with the stronger 3 molar percentage zirconia. CAD-CAM, once again, CAD-CAM technology allows us to do this very accurately. Two different types of abutments are seen here for implants. The left side of your screen, we would call this a hybrid abutment. It's where you have a titanium interface that interfaces with the implant, and then the zirconia is the top portion, or the portion that you would see in the mouth, and then center ground to the zirconia. This is a very nice way to use zirconia. These two pieces are luted together, so there is potential for the two pieces to come apart. The right side of your screen is an entirely zirconia abutment. Once again, this would be done out of a very high strength zirconia. You can see that the interface with the implant is also zirconia, so this is one piece. There have been some issues with fracture of that internal component, and you have to know the pros and cons to each. I think most people have gone to using the tie-base hybrids like you see on the left side of your screen. Once again, talking about hybrids, this is a hybrid denture that is full contour zirconia. So a couple slides before, you saw that a framework being designed, and then you would have options of actually milling crowns of lithium disilicate, or maybe even separate crowns in zirconia that you could then cement to that framework. This is a one-piece zirconia hybrid. As you can see, a nice job is being done with staining and glazing and adding different types of characteristics to make it look lifelike. This is Avoclar's Zircad portfolio. I'm going to show you the Avoclar zirconia. It gives you a good idea of what a nice portfolio from a company like Avoclar has. Other companies have similar products. We're going to focus on one tonight, just so you can get an idea of what the different options would be. So if you look to the left of your screen, the MT or multi puck, this is going to be the medium translucency, but multi-layered. So this puck actually has a gradient that has a different in color and sizal, basically color, and then a dentin color. A very nice variable translucent material that's quite unique in the dental industry. I'll show you some cases with this towards the end of the lecture. Then beside that, you'll see the MT, the medium translucency puck, and then the two to the right are the LT, the low translucency, and then the medium opacity. The two to the left, the MTs, are going to be a 4 molar percent yttrium stabilized zirconia, and then the LT and the MO are going to be a 3 molar percent yttrium stabilized. So I'll show you sort of where these are best used. This shows you how the MT multi looks in its monolithic form. So you can see that you have a medium translucency towards the cervical, which is going to represent more of a dentin look, and then the high translucency is going to give you more of an enamel look. And this is done without any other characterization. So you can see how nice that is, not to have your ceramist stain and glaze that to try to get that ideal look. So looking how those 4 pucks can be used, and you can see the different indications. The MT multi, full contour crowns and full contour 3-unit bridges. You can see that the stronger zirconias, the lower translucency and the medium opacity, are used for a lot of different things. The LT is probably the workhorse, and you can see that it has indications of use for almost every category. Another big issue with zirconia has always been the potential for increased wear. This is something that was another reason that zirconia initially was covered with feldspathic type porcelain, is because of the fear of making it monolithic and then the wear potential as it's aged. A couple interesting studies have been done, and Dr. John Burgess has done some great studies, and you'll see me reference him throughout this webinar, and I'll give you some more information at the end. But these are from studies that he's done. Polished zirconia wears opposing enamel 10 times less than feldspathic porcelains. So feldspathic porcelain, remember, is going to be all of our PFMs basically. So if it's polished, we're going to get 10 times less than our traditional PFMs. Polished zirconia wears the opposing enamel slightly less than type 4 gold. So that's something that you can certainly compare it to. Wear from zirconia does not increase with time. Wear of glazed zirconia was significantly greater to the opposing enamel compared with polished non-glazed zirconia. The articulating surface opposing enamel should be polished zirconia in all anterior and especially posterior areas. So I think that the take-home point from the wear side of it is all surfaces should be polished. That's going to be touching an opposing restoration or tooth or crown or whatever else. So you can talk to your lab about polishing the surface, or you can certainly take a polisher. If there's a glazed surface, you really should go ahead and just take a polisher over that glazed surface. If you adjust it and form a rough surface, you must go back with the proper polishers and polish that. If you do that, then wear becomes a non-issue. You can see that even compared to gold, it's going to be quite kind to the opposing dentition. Let's talk about preparations, because there are some preparation criteria for zirconia that's important. Once again, if you're using the Zircad, the Ivoclar's zirconia, there's going to be a couple guidelines. Remember, the different zirconias with their different strengths have minimal requirements as far as reduction. And this is going to be the preparation guidelines for the MT and the MT multi full contour. So once again, this is the more aesthetic, has more yttrium stabilized molar percentage. So this is going to be the 4 molar percentage. And the monolithic anteriors, the incisal and occlusal reduction of the tooth structure, at least 0.8 of a millimeter. Reduction on the labial and lingual in the cervical area by at least 0.8. So if you're using the MT or the multi for full contour, 0.8 of a millimeter is really all you need. And you see in the little circle in the middle the type of margin that you need. It's basically a chamfer margin. The monolithic posteriors, you basically need a millimeter. If you can remember a millimeter, then you're going to be fine. The big thing that I think a lot of people will make a mistake on, I'm going to highlight my cursor here, is this area. So 1 millimeter in the central fossa area. So if you're prepping straight across, you're probably going to have a very thin spot in the central fossa area. So just make sure that when you're prepping anatomically. If you're using the LT full contour, then this is going to show you for the anterior, you can go as thin as 0.4 of a millimeter. And that's quite thin. And then the posterior as thin as 0.6. Once again, you're looking at a chamfer margin. If you're using the MO or LT, the frameworks, we're looking at, this is for cutback. We want to at least 1.4, I usually say 1.5 millimeters on the incisal edge and the lingual concavity areas, and about 1 millimeter at the cervical areas. And once again, this would be like bridge abutment frameworks. You're going to see the same on the posterior, 1.6 at the occluding surfaces, and then around the cervical areas, we're looking at least 1 millimeter. So this is the typical prep that we would consider conventional crown preps, and this is appropriate for zirconia. Zirconia, you can really prep a lot of different ways. I think that like any other restoration, having a little more reduction is not going to hurt you. If you're trying to be conservative, you also have the options to be strong and still be very conservative. Most of the crown preps that we see, taking old crowns off, you're going to have a preparation very similar to what you're seeing here, which is fine for zirconia. This is another preparation on lower bicuspid. The reduction is appropriate. Probably could use a little more anatomical reduction in the center of this area, even though I think you have at least 2 to 3 millimeters of clearance here. The margin is also something that you'll need to think about with zirconia. Even the more translucent zirconias, you're going to see the margin if you get some recession. The crown beside this is a lithium disilicate crown, and you'll see that the blend of the ceramic will be a little bit better than the blend of zirconia at the margin. This preparation is a modified onlay, or full cuspal coverage, but you're not taking the prep all the way to the tissue level. To me, this is a true ceramic, a high-strength ceramic preparation. This, in my mind, would be a lithium disilicate preparation. Could you do zirconia here? You could. The strength would be fine, and you can now bond zirconia, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But I think from an aesthetic standpoint, I think you're going to be able to blend a glass ceramic like lithium disilicate much better than you would a zirconia. Even the more translucent zirconias, you're going to have a hard time blending to a natural tooth structure in a situation like this. So I would prefer using lithium disilicate EMAX in this situation. So let's talk about how to deliver a zirconia restoration, because there's always been quite a bit of controversy about the best way to do it. And I'll tell you my opinion, because I've taken off a lot of zirconia crowns in my career, and they're not easy to remove. So you always have to think about retrievability. So can you get a crown off? And that's something that we never want to think about. But as hard as the materials are now, whether you're looking at lithium disilicate or zirconia, you do have to think about the best way, but also the what if you did have to remove it. And there's a lot of people that will tell you that if you're doing zirconia, that maybe not bonding is an option using cementation. However, we now have some in-between materials that are bonding, but they're not giving us the high strength bonding that we would need, like say for a veneer. So let's talk about the options here. This little pyramid I've used for a long time. It really helps me think about cements in 3 different categories. The bottom of the pyramid is going to be our conventional cements. That would be like Reliax, Luting Plus, Fuji Sim, zinc, any zinc phosphates, polycarboxylates, resin modified glass ionomers, or glass ionomers. So this is the cements that we would usually have cemented our PFMs or our gold crowns with. The next category in the middle of the pyramid are going to be the self-adhesive cements. This is the category that I feel like has really changed the market, if you will, and I think is going to be really perfect for a lot of zirconia crowns. The cement that I use is Speed Sim Plus. You'll see some of the other cements in that category like Unicem and Maxim. So that's going to be a really nice, easy to use category. And then we go to the top of the pyramid. Once again, our number of steps is getting a lot greater, but so is our adhesion. This is going to be products like Multi-Link Automix, Vari-Link Aesthetic, or quite a few others in that category. So we're having a separate adhesive that goes on the tooth, and then we're using a resin cement in the crown. The middle of the pyramid, we're not having to use a separate adhesive on the tooth. The adhesive is actually in the cement. So certainly something to think about your delivery technique and how much do you really want to go through to deliver a crown. If you're doing zirconia as a single molar crown, this is something that you're trying to do efficiently, and the number of steps may make a difference to you. So we do have some options there. Things to know: bond strength and fracture toughness is going to be much higher with the true adhesives than it is conventional cements. The other thing that you have to be aware of is if you're going to use a conventional cement or even a self-adhesive cement, your prep should be relatively retentive. So what does that mean? So retentive to me means what we learned in dental school. Our preps should be 4 to 6 degree taper. We should have long prep walls, pretty much your conventional prep that we showed earlier. If it's a flat top prep where you have no retentive nature to it, you're going to need a true adhesive. It's probably not where you could be doing zirconia anyway. So let's talk about if we are going to bond zirconia. Once we've tried in the zirconia crown, we've contaminated the surface, so we need to clean the surface. We know that our saliva has a lot of phosphates or phospholipids in it, so we need to clean away that. For other materials other than metal and zirconia, we can use phosphoric acid to do that. With zirconia and or PFM, if you're trying to bond to that, you cannot use phosphoric acid to clean that surface. You're going to need to use something that is more like a universal cleanser, like the AviClean. My recommendation is use AviClean on every crown to clean it before you cement it. That's going to be a safe thing to do, and more than likely you're going to really increase your bond to that intaglio surface. It's really easy to use. You paint it on, let it react for 20 seconds, and then you rinse it off. Primers. Do you need zirconia primers? Well, that's a good question. With some products you do, with some products you don't. Zirconia primers can increase your bond to the zirconia from your resin cement. And like I said, other products like the SpeedSim Plus, with SpeedSim Plus, you can just use the the AviClean, and then go straight to your SpeedSim Plus. You're going to get really good adhesion to the taglio surface of the crown with the SpeedSim Plus. This is a chart with a lot of different primers. The one in pink is the one that I use when I do use them. This is what I would use on my lithium disilicate, on my zirconia if I were going to use a primer on zirconia. And you can see the Monobond Plus basically will prime any substrate. Other products don't always prime all of the substrates that you're wanting to use. So I like to keep it simple, and Monobond Plus allows me to do that. This is a typical posterior zirconia crown, and if we're going to bond that, we're going to try it in, of course. It does contaminate the surface. The lab has already sandblasted that internal surface from the lab, so you get it sandblasted. Try it in, you contaminate it. We adjust it if we need to. Now we're going to go ahead and clean the surface. This is going to be the AviClean. We're going to let it react for 20 seconds and rinse it off. This is the SpeedSim Plus. So it's a dual barrel syringe, and this is a squirt and go. So remember, the adhesive is already in the cement. So we're going to squirt it into the crown, and then we're going to seat it, and then we're going to tack cure. You can tack it just for a couple seconds on the buccal and lingual. The SpeedSim Plus gets to a really nice gel phase. where it cleans up very nicely and very easily. It comes off in big chunks. You go ahead, still stabilize the top of the crown, floss in between, pull out any excess cement, and then do your final cure, and you can adjust occlusion immediately. Really nice, easy way to deliver your zirconia. A couple other cases here: conventional prep, Ivoclean on the internal part of the crown, rinse that off, Speed Sim Plus, seat the crown, tack it from each side, peel away. Nice and easy. Let's talk about aesthetics. So for me, Emax lithium disilicate, clinically proven to be the best combination of aesthetics and strength. Over 100 million restorations placed, and I do feel like I have to find a reason not to use Emax on a lot of my restorations. With the new multi zirconia and the MT zirconia that we're seeing now from Ivoclar, it does allow me to use that in higher stress areas in the back. And the case that I'm getting ready to show you will show you maybe where we can even mix the materials. So for me, I have to find a reason not to use lithium disilicate. This is a typical case that we did with lithium disilicate, and you can see that the aesthetics are great. Nice bonded case. The strength is going to be high, so no question for me, this is still going to be lithium disilicate. Another case, lithium disilicate befores and afters. Once again, veneers, 0.2 of a millimeter thick lithium disilicate veneers. Very nice aesthetic. Without a doubt, my go-to for most aesthetic cases. This is a case that I did not deliver. I hope a couple people are chuckling in the background because not one of my cases, but a case that I had to remove. This is what a lot of people think about when they think about zirconia in the anterior, is the chalk white, the early on zirconia that you could see from across the room. These aren't natural teeth. So not what we're talking about with aesthetics. Let's talk about what we have available now as far as aesthetic zirconia. So this is a all ceramic bridge that was done probably about 10 years ago, and aesthetic results were fine. No complaints from aesthetics. If you look at the lower anteriors, this is really concerns me. You know, we see these cases with the lower incisor removed. Look where the cuspids are. The cuspids are going to be right against your lateral incisors, so all your function is now going to be on your lateral incisors. Not an ideal situation. So conventional high-strength ceramics really are probably not going to survive long-term in a situation like this. In this case, we had a vertical fracture from the cervical all the way down, sort of the distal facial part of the abutment of the lateral, and the bridge was loose. So we removed the bridge. Thankfully, we were able to preserve the ovate ponic, made him a nice temporary to wear. And this is the Ivoclar's MT, the multi-layered zirconia. Now, that's a pretty nice result, even for a ceramic, but for a zirconia, I think that's pretty phenomenal. You can see that my ceramist was able to do a little stain and glaze on the incisal edge to get a really nice natural look. This is day of delivery. But that, to me, is now really getting into the aesthetic realm where I feel really comfortable in a bridge application with this type of aesthetic result. Once again, we talked about fracture toughness. This is where, like the MT multi from Ivoclar stands out. To me, you can see that the fracture toughness is higher than most of the other translucent type zirconias, but you still get really good strength. You still get really good strength and aesthetics. So this is an important number for me. Let's run through a case here before we end. This is a tough case because we have an anterior 3-unit bridge, but we're also going to do other restorations, other full coverage restorations around it. So years past, we've had a lot of different options. And we know that with the occlusion the way it is, I'm not thinking about doing the bridge in lithium disilicate because of the span and the connector size. So I'm going to do the bridge in zirconia. So this is going through some of our 3-shape design process. We'll use the ability to do a mock-up on our photograph in the 3-shape software to get appropriate tooth sizes. This is the diagnostic design software that Matt from CMR Dental is helping me design the case. There's quite a few gingival architecture issues with this case. This is where we're taking our scanned model and then overlaying it onto the proposed design model. We can see cross sections of both there to show me how much preparation I'll need. This is the upper and lower design model. And once again, cross sections to show me where the most reduction may be needed. So now instead of a traditional wax up, which a wax up is done by hand, takes quite a while to do it. Now we do digital diagnostic designs that are now doing the same thing that the wax up did for me in the past. We can use that for quite a few things. We can still make a putty matrix from that digital design. We can make reduction guides. We can make a suck down. So we can still use that same way we did our wax up, but obviously it's much more durable and it's reprintable. So I have a 3D printer in my office. Matt can send me the file. I can reprint the model as many times as I want. So it makes it just a really nice addition to a workflow we've been using for years. In this case, we have the old bridge, which had relatively aggressive preparations, and then we have the newer preparations that are not as aggressively prepped. So that can often be an issue when it comes to material thickness. This is my lab script to Matt, basically saying a couple things we want to change, tells him where I want the color. We make our provisionals based on that digital diagnostic design. We work out all of the functional issues that we need in her temporaries. Protrusive, take photographs, make changes in the temporaries if we need. We now scan with our Trio Central scanner our provisionals. We can overlay the provisionals onto the design that we're proposing. Now Matt does the final design of the case. Lower anteriors also. This is our Zirconia 3-unit bridge. So this is the MT multi that you can see that Matt has used some coloring to add a little bit more effects to the zirconia. This is monolithic MT, and this is what it looks after it's been centered. And you can see the color gradient, which is really nice without doing any cutback. In years past, that would never been able to be done, especially with zirconia. You can see that the upper arch is done with lithium disilicate everywhere except for the 3-unit bridge. So follow the case as we go. I'll show you a little bit of a issue that we had. This is going to be the blue phase, the lithium disilicate against the 3-unit bridge, lower anteriors. You can see the minor cutback that Matt did on the facial of the lithium disilicate to add ceramic. This is the lithium disilicate and the zirconia on the model. So look at the translucency. So you see the 3-unit bridge on the left and then the lithium disilicate on the right. And you can see a very similar translucency when you take light and shine it through it. These are the lower anteriors. Once again, the zirconia bridge from the lingual. And this is going to be, the bridge is on the right side of the screen with our MT multi, and then the left side of the screen is the lithium disilicate. You can see that Matt used a little bit powder and liquid to give us effects on the Emax and stained and glazed on the zirconia. So this is the color, this is the translucency effect that you get from the zirconia and from the lithium disilicate. And once again, really nice effects coming from the zirconia. So this is both on the solid model. Close up, you can see at the cervical of the lithium disilicate, we're getting a little bit of show through from the root or from the dentin of the preparation. Matt also decided we were going to do a couple extra crowns. So we're going to also see what it looks like on try-in if we did the monolithic MT multi on all 6 anteriors. So he went ahead and milled 3 more crowns on 6 through 8 just to give us a comparison. So this is going to be sort of a trial for us. You can see the posterior is still lithium disilicate. On those new 3, he's going to do the same as he did on the bridge, stain and glaze only. Really nice effects. Look closely at those incisal edges. That's all with external stains and glazes. That's the 6 anterior MT multi. So this is the try-in. If you look at the bridge on the right side of the screen, Emax is on the left side of the screen. We decided that we actually like the look of the all zirconia, and I'll show you sort of the difference. This is going to be the ovated 3-unit bridge and the MT multi. This is the anterior 6 now in MT multi. Posterior is in lithium disilicate. This is a close-up of both left and right side. So that is our MT multi. Remember, no cutback has been done on that. That's all monolithic zirconia with stain and glaze. That's the final product. Really nice result from a high-strength zirconia that has multiple gradients of translucency. So we've come to the end. A couple things I want to just reiterate. One is options now with newer zirconias really do open up some interesting thoughts. For me, I'm still going to use, for my aesthetic cases, I'm using lithium disilicate. But if I have a combination case, this is certainly the way I'm going to go. I know now that I can do a conservative prep and do really nice zirconia with the MT multi. Talk to your dental labs. Make sure that you know what they're giving you and ask for certain things by name. Do your research on the zirconias and find out the ones that you want to use and make sure you're getting the best for the indication. We have a few minutes now. We have about 5 minutes for questions. I'll be glad to answer anything that you guys can shoot at me, and I'll be glad to field those. Okay, guys, a lot of good questions. I think that certainly one of the questions is about dental labs. Yes, most dental labs are doing mill zirconia now. Whether they offer the aesthetic zirconia, have to ask them. Another question about bonding. Yes, you can bond zirconia. My suggestion would be to use the Ivoclean and then a product like SpeedSim. That will give you plenty of adhesion, and you really shouldn't have any problem with debonds at all. And got time for one more question. Yes, I do think that we're to the point now that we can say that wear is not an issue with zirconia. Time will certainly tell, but from all the studies that I've seen lately, polished zirconia will not be a problem as far as wear. So make sure you're polishing the occlusal surface of your zirconia. Look for polishing systems that are made for monolithic zirconia, and you should be fine. It doesn't take long, but certainly worth the effort to make sure that you're not creating a problem. Okay, guys, that's about all the time we have. I appreciate your attendance, and I hope you have a good night. Thank you.